Where's that confounded bridge? Remember that in the Crunge? I love that song. Oh man, another day, another walk. Jeff Indyke here. This is a really cool story, and it's a tribute to my late Uncle Mel. You know, I really miss him. You know, he left way too soon. You know, but I just want to tell you a couple stories about my Uncle Mel. Well, first of all, my Uncle Mel was my first drum teacher. And I'll never forget, this is really cool. First, you know, I wanted to play drums from a pretty early age, I think. I don't know. Maybe you're right about the time that I saw the Beatles. I remember seeing Ringo Starr on the Ed Sullivan Show. Wow, you know, and the funny thing about it is Joe Toscano. Hey Joe, man, I hope you're still out there. We grew up on the same block. Boy, did we get in trouble together. We used to do things But Joe, he got a drum set for Christmas. I'll never forget, I went over to his house. He had the Ringo Starr model, the same drum set that Ringo had. By the way, I played on that model. It wasn't Ringo Starr's drum kit. At the Sam Ash Clinic in New York City. If you go up online, I'm actually on that model. It's a really good looking kit. I don't know if they called it the Ringo Starr model, but it was definitely the kit the exact kit that Ringo played on when he played in the Beatles. Pardon this light. So anyway, you know, so when Joe got that drum set, I was really envious, you know. I didn't have a drum set yet. You know, I tried to sign up for the band, and when I was in elementary school or junior high school, I think, you had to write a second choice. So I wrote clarinet, and everybody wanted to play drums, so I didn't get in. I wanted to have those red practice pads. Remember those really cool red practice pads with the stand? I think it had a stand. Those, by the way, were really good pads. Those were the days, when they made them a little softer. The stuff they have out now, is a little hard. That's why, I'm always searching for the real feel pads. Anyway, so finally, I was 12 years old, and you know, my Uncle Mel, he's a professional drummer. He played club dates. Mostly club dates, but back then, club date bands were not what they are today. Club date bands of today, play top 40, you know. Yeah, you know, the club date bands today, most of the musicians are not really the greatest jazz players. My uncle, he played with great jazz players because, you know, that was way back when jazz was sort of the happening thing. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. So finally, I was at my Uncle Mel's house, and they said, you know, Uncle Mel has a surprise for you. And there were these two giant drumsticks. I think they were 2 S's, and a practice pad, which he got me. My Uncle Mel, at one time, was the manager of Sam Ash. Back in Hempstead. No, actually in Brooklyn. Yeah, in Brooklyn. I think he went over to Hempstead later, but in any event, so, you know, he was able to get this stuff, probably, you know, really for free almost, you know, being a manager. So, what happened was, so he goes, this is going to be your first drum lesson. They took a picture of me. I have a picture of me still, Oh, I remember, my Uncle Mel, was going to take some pictures of me for my bar mitzvah. And when you get bar mitzvah, you had a thing called, it was this little card they gave everybody. Today I am a man. I wasn't a man, I was 13 years old, you know, but I thought that was kind of cool. So he was taking pictures of me that day. But the surprise was not the picture. And you should have seen the smile on my face because when they took the pictures, I had known that he was going to give me the drum lesson. So my Uncle Mel gave me my first drum lesson. Now here's the thing, right, that makes it notoriously fantastic. My Uncle Mel, being a professional player, he could definitely read because he cut shows. He used to play like a lot of shows. Worked for a guy named Delta Steel. And he had to do a lot of shows, like at the Catskills. So my Uncle Mel had to read. Because in order to do a show, you have to read. So he had to, I don't know, I never really talked to him too much about who he studied with. I wish I would have. I forgot to ask him about that. But in any event, he started to give me drum lessons. Now here's the thing, which makes it really fantastic. My Uncle Mel had never taught in his life. I was his first and probably only student. He attempted to write a little bit later, I think to teach his son. But I don't know how long that lasted. That's my cousin Jay, by the way. Jay Fields, you want to look out for that guy. He's a monster. Well, there's a reason he's a monster. I'll tell you about that later. So anyway, and I'll never forget it, right? The first book, right, that my Uncle Mel had me play out of was a stick and control book, and another book called Here's the Drum. I don't remember who wrote it. I do remember also, too, having the elementary breeze easy reading method, I think. But the cool part about it was from the very, very start, my Uncle Mel got me reading. Right from the very beginning. There was no, that was the main thing. But the other thing that was really cool about our lessons together, my Uncle Mel had this beautiful blue Premier drum set. By the way, I'll tell you about that a little bit later. It was really cool. So, as part of the lesson, my Uncle Mel would show me, all the different club date beats, the Lindy, the rock beat, the polka, the hora, the rumba, the cha-cha, what else? The rock and roll beat, twist, shout, the twist, which was a rock and roll beat. I don't want to tell you how old I am, but it was around the time of the Beatles, so you got to figure, right, the music back then, the drumming back then, right, was a little bit different than it was today. You didn't have, the funk guys that you have today. But you had Buddy Rich. I'll tell you about that in a moment. So anyway, we went on with the lessons, and what happened eventually, once I had a pretty good understanding. Well, here's the thing, right, that was mind-blowing. He started teaching me when I was around 12. I was going to be 13 pretty soon because that was when I was bar mitzvah. So I was doing really good, right? I had all these beats down and whatnot, everything. But I didn't have a drum set yet. Here's the cool part. So I'm at my house. My Uncle Mel's over with Aunt Sheila. I don't know if Cousin Jay was around yet. And, Cousin Jay was probably just an infant at the time. Yeah, because I'm 10 years older than him. So figure if I was around 12, he was probably around 2 years old at that time. My cousin Jay, right? He loves this. I love to do this, right? He used to go like this. He used to go, He used to go, I don't know what that meant. I think he was trying to say clock. Anyway, I joke with him about that. He doesn't do that anymore. But so anyway, I'm at my house. My Uncle Mel and my Aunt Sheila are there. Cousin Robin wasn't born yet. That's Jay's sister. She's really cool. She's got a big afro. She still has a big afro. She looks exactly the same. Some people never change. But anyway, husband Dennis is really cool. He's a smart guy. So anyway, so my mother goes to me, there's some garbage in the basement, right? You gotta go down there and take it out. So I went down there, and what's goddamn down there, right, is the blue Premier drum set that my uncle was teaching me on. Little did I know he had two drum sets. He had a drum set for the house, which I guess I don't know if he really practiced, because he did a lot of club dates. And then he had his road drum set, but I didn't know that, because they were the same color. And when I remember that my uncle would take me on jobs with him, club dates, and I would sit in sometimes, for a song or two, and I would help him with the drums and stuff. So it was kind of a cool thing. I was kind of his roadie. And I remember playing with a guy. This is really cool. I remember playing with a guy. His name was Pops. And I think he was a sax player. And he told me that he played with Louis Armstrong. I believe that he did. He was an older guy at that time. And I don't know how old he was. It's probably long gone. But here's the cool thing. His name was Pops. And if you go on the Hot 7 sessions, there's one recording where Louis goes, "Hey, Pops, how about you hit that groove?" I think that was the Pops that I met. I'm not sure if Pops was a keyboard player or a sax player, but he was one of the two. He wasn't a trumpet player. And, so I got a chance to play with really, really fantastic jazz musicians. These guys played jazz. In those days, club dates club date bands for weddings and stuff wasn't the top 40 of today, but they did some top 40. So here's the cool thing. So I went down, and there's this beautiful premier drum set with everything attached, foot pedals, cymbals. I couldn't believe it, my first drum set. I was so excited. Oh, I was so excited. So here's the cool thing. As I went along, my Uncle Mel did some other real cool things for me. Eventually, I think what happened was he got kind of too busy to teach me. I don't know how long he taught me for. I wish I could have got those lessons on tape. I wish I could have filmed my Uncle Mel demonstrating the beats, because, you see, not only did he have me reading, but he had me playing these rhythms on the drum set. So by the time I had the drum set, I already knew how to play basic rhythms I could play, and he took me on a job. He took me on a job with him. I was 12, 13 years old, and he took me on jobs until I was probably about 18. After that, I just started playing in bands. And then I remember I did a couple of jobs for Del Castillo, but I didn't go in the club date direction. I knew that I probably wasn't going to be in the club date direction. That wasn't the direction I wanted to go into. I wanted to play progressive, original rock and roll music. I was getting into Chicago. I was getting into ELP. Early Mahavishnu Orchestra. Since in the 70s. So I knew I really wasn't going to go in that direction. And I'm glad I didn't, because I didn't want to really be a club date musician. Now, making club dates is really cool. You can make a lot of money doing that, but it wasn't where I really wanted to go. So here's the other thing that my Uncle Mel did that was totally amazing. He took me to see a couple of major acts. You see, my uncle being the manager of Sam Ash, he had a lot of connections, I'll give you an example, He was friends with Alvin Lee and 10 Years After. And Rick Lee on drums, Alvin Lee, I forget the bass player's name, and I forget the keyboard player's name. Wow, 10 Years After. So when they came to Madison Square Garden a couple of times, my Uncle Mel had tickets, but not just tickets to see the band, but backstage. So I got to go backstage to see 10 Years After. And I got to meet Rick Lee, He used to call me Jerry. I don't know, I guess he got my name confused. But wow, he was a really good drummer. He did a mallets. When he soloed, he played with the mallets. He did brush stuff, and he took a really long drum solo. He was amazing. I'm only 13 or 14 years old at the time, 15, 16. So I wasn't really playing on a professional level yet. I really enjoyed that, and I'll never forget it. going backstage. I never really talked to Alvin Lee. He was really kind of quiet. I talked to Rick Lee though, because I was a drummer, And I don't know, would have been cool if I got to know him better, and so we only saw him around. I think I only saw Taves after like 3 times. And one time around, my Uncle Mel had special picks that he had made at Sam Ash for Alvin Lee, and they wouldn't let him in backstage, for some reason. And then Alvin saw him and said, "Hey, Mel, come on." He gave him a big hug. It was like really, really cool. And let him in, and we got in and went backstage. I remember they had these jelly beans, I guess those guys like jelly beans, but those guys are right, they were stars. And I remember at one of the Alvin Lee concerts, Ramatam opened up. That was April Lawton, by the way. I played with her years later, once. She's a really good guitar player. And Edgar Winter. And I remember seeing those guys coming off stage, and Alvin Lee and those guys were getting ready to go on stage. And we were backstage, so I got a chance to watch the 10 years after from the side of the stage, on the stage, but off the stage, of course. And wow, that was like really cool, watching those guys Alvin Lee's big hit, by the way, for those of you who might not, If I Could Change the World, that was their big top 40 hit. But the biggest hit was at Woodstock, 10 years after. It was called Going Home. I'm going home. He did this amazing guitar player, rolling. I think Alvin Lee's not with us anymore, but he was amazing. He was like considered one of the great guitar players of our time. When you listen to guys like the late Eddie Van Halen, Ronnie Montrose, Peter Frampton, the great guitar, even Jimmy Page. Well, wait a second, Zeppelin was just kind of coming out at about that time, so yeah. So, but a lot of guitar players have really looked up to Alvin Lee. He was kind of considered the great guitar player of our time, and Rick Lee was just amazing. So that, was really cool. So, it was then, when I saw those guys, I knew I wanted to be, I wanted to play music, I wanted to be a rock star, Actually, that never happened, and that's cool. But I knew I wanted to make my life in music, and that was like the cool thing, the really cool thing. Especially seeing the way, how cool it was to play in front of a crowd like that. It was at Madison Square Garden. There must have been right about, I don't know, it was a pretty big crowd. I'd never played in front of that many people. But anyway, and then the other thing that Uncle Mel did, which was really cool, well, 2 other things. So one he took me to see Buddy Rich. And it was at, I don't know if you guys know on Long Island, there's a place called Speaks. I don't know what it is now. It became Speaks. But before that, I think it was called the Tiger's Tail. And it's still there now. I don't know what it is now. But it was a big club. And Buddy Rich was playing there. And I don't know how old I was. I probably was about 17, maybe. 16 or 17. And I remember Carmen Apiece, who actually was with the Vanilla Fudge. I never saw them play, but I had all their albums with their autographs because my Uncle Mel was really good friends with the Vanilla Fudge. He sold them all their equipment, being the manager of Sam Ash. And I remember meeting Carmine for the first time. I don't think he remembers. I was just a kid. He was telling me he was there to see Buddy Rich, which is a statement, because everybody was there to see Buddy. I think Bill Becker was there too, the guy that I went to school with. And we were watching Buddy. Nobody could take their eyes off of Buddy. He was so amazing. Let me stop this treadmill. And that was amazing. Yeah, that was just totally amazing. And I told you the story about how I thought after seeing Buddy, I thought, I can do that. Yeah, right, I could do that. I never could do that, and I never will. But anyway, I really thought I could as a young person. But that just goes to show, right, that when you're really young, you're delusional, you know what I mean? You think you could do anything. So that was really cool. And then the last thing, my Uncle Mel had this drum set. It was a Hammond drum set. And my Uncle Mel, right, was able to get a lot of, well, he got, like free drum sets, sample drum sets. And Hammond was a very obscure make, and they didn't make a lot of them. I think Bruford played on Hammond a little while. And I think Mitch Mitchell might have played on Hammond. Unfortunately, right, they were thrown in a trash bin, right, by some really inconsiderate people, who I'm still a little annoyed at. But so I don't have that set anymore. But he gave it to me, and I used that drum set after the premiere set to do a lot of my recording, a lot of my mail course, a lot of performances, a lot of the stuff you hear, the early stuff. I used the Hammond set. It was an amazing set. It had thick wood, and it was just, I think it was one of the warmest sounding sets I ever had, and he gave it to me, he said about I could, actually I borrowed it and I never gave it back to him. But anyway, the fact that, it was thrown out, that's a sad story. But, and I don't think, I'd love to get another set of those because they just had a really good sound. I did a lot of recording on those Hammonds, a lot of work on those drums. And I even, did club dates with those drums, and, but now, they're gone. But anyway, so that was that. And then finally, the last part of my relationship with Uncle Mel, which is the coolest part of my career, whatever that is, is he asked me if I would teach his son, Cousin Jay, because he wanted to learn how to play. And, I said, sure, of course, absolutely. I had never taught either. And Jay was my first student. Considering he was my first student, the way he ended up, he's like a world-class drummer, this guy. I was really honored to be able to teach him. And, when we play together, it's like, when I play with him, it's like I'm playing on the same frequency. It's really, we do a lot of things alike. By the way, we're both really seasoned players. Jay is a monster. And and it was a funny thing, my uncle wanted to pay me, and I didn't want to take money, It was like, all right, he says, I insist, on paying you. So I'll never forget it, right? I think he said, well, how's $6 sound for an hour? And I said, all right, so that's. But here's the cool part, right? After teaching Jay a while, which was really cool, I didn't know what I was doing. I was writing some stuff for him, used a couple of books. Jay recommended this guy, Joe, who was my very first actual real student aside from Jay. At Sam Ash, he was looking for a drum teacher, and I taught this guy, Joe. And then the next thing you know, I started writing out, these drum survey things, the Billy Cobham, the Herders, the Tony's Flams. I started writing out all these different riff type things, and started to use those to teach. And if it wasn't for Jay, I don't know if I would have become a drum instructor. So the story, it's perfect timing. What they call that is serendipity. And I hope you guys like the story. Hey, Cousin Jay, I'll see you right at the Finkelfest. Love you guys.